Welcome to Schmidt List, a podcast on innovation, creativity, and entrepreneurship. Join host Kurt Schmidt, president of Foundry, as he and his guest share valuable insights and strategies. This is the perfect opportunity to explore fresh ideas to improve yourself and your business. Come join Kurt as he interviews this week's inspiring guest.
Brandon, how are you?
I'm good. Did you use a bot to write that book or did you write it yourself?
No, I wrote that myself. I did. Yeah. I did use AI to ask me some questions. I used it as a prompter, and that was really helpful. It worked out good.
I agree. And I bought it, but I haven't read it yet. So I wish I could comment more, but I won't use AI to comment and question you.
Leave a review because the publisher will kill me if I don't pester people's reviews. If you bought the book, leave a review. All right, Brandon. So tell me about the work you do and who you do it for.
Man, you caught me jet lagged. We just got back from Kenya where we were working with the World Bank and the central banks of East African countries. I didn't realize this, but Africa is around 10% of greenhouse emissions right now, but they're growing faster than everyone else. So as we try to improve ourselves in Europe and America and China, it won't matter if Africa doesn't adopt greener activities as they grow well past 1 billion people. So a wicked challenge that we'd like to try to help solve. And we did a little then, but 16 hours of flying is never fun.
Talk to me more about the idea of how are you specifically focused on that climate change transformation effort? Is it a technology thing? Is it a people thing? How are you specifically trying to contribute to that?
Yeah, I have a personal answer, a societal answer, or AI is going to change our work forever. So my answer is only partial. First, societal. I assume you live in Minneapolis like I do.
I do.
We think we're more advanced and green in helping the planet. And maybe we've switched to electric cars and we recycle. But the reality is if you're flying or doing other things in a cold climate, unless you've spent probably over $500,000, you're still emitting a lot of bad stuff for the planet. Mm-hmm. So what are each of us doing individually, not just leaving it to the big corporations to figure out climate change? What are we each doing individually to make an impact? So to answer your question, that interest or fright for me and my family, what does it take to have a family be net zero? Nobody really can answer that question for you. So because in my job, I'm pretty lucky that I get to use a lot of really cool new tech and with really smart people around the world to try to help governments and multinational institutions figure this out in partnership with big corporations. Always just bugged the heck out of me that these corporations can't really figure it out. And they're, what is the term now? Greenwashing. I'd like to practice what I preach. And so I was like, what if I can't figure it out for my own family? How are these giant 100, 200 million person organizations going to figure it out? And so it's this constant internal battle, maybe like the battle between which is better, Minneapolis or St. Paul. Do you help the corporations that are doing most of the polluting, or do you do it individually that's ultimately the cause of the pollution?
Sure. So you've got to make that choice of, is it more of a groundswell, right? Or do you use the trickle-down economics sort of approach?
Yeah, neither work alone, right? So unless more people step up and unless more corporations step up and unless there's more consultants isn't the right word by any stretch of the imagination. I'm definitely a Big Five recovering consultant still later in my career. How do we all push at the same time? And maybe that'll make a difference.
To your point, if they could solve the problem by themselves, they probably would have solved it by now, right?
Yes. I guess everybody says that though, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I say. Tell me about the because in my mind's eye, and I could be biased, but it sounds like bureaucracy is probably the number one challenge in these large organizations to start this transformation. Would that be correct? Or is it a technological issue, awareness, like security? Like I've had a lot of people on the show that talk about security and say the number one thing is awareness, and education is the best way to combat and make the best security. So what, in your opinion, is holding some of these bigger companies back?
Let's start with bureaucracy. Bureaucracy doesn't exist. Fear exists, or manufactured fear in people's minds exists. There's nothing stopping anyone from stepping up in these bigger organizations and challenging the status quo. But people are too freaking afraid to challenge the status quo. What can we do to support the individuals within these organizations to say, fuck the bureaucracy, let's really push what's right to be done? That probably won't happen because most people are just too damn afraid.
Yeah. Well, they want to, in the larger corporations, it's pretty normal to try and stay below the radar, right? Not stay above it, right? Because if you're above the radar, that's how you get shut down.
If everybody or a handful of people had a little less fear, you can't shut too many people down at the same time. So
Sure.
How do we, without breaking security concerns, because there aren't a lot of security concerns with just trying something for the environment, how do we get rid of some of that fear that so many people in these big organizations have? You fuck up, what's the worst that could happen? Yeah, I guess you could lose your job, but if you're doing it for the planet and the right reasons.
Yeah, that's true. But again, like speaking for some of these folks, if they don't feel like being a martyr, how would you coach them on approaching this in a way that can actually make some momentum? Should they be putting together proposals? Should they be bringing outside information in? What should be some of the steps that you've seen work in the past?
That's what's so fun about the new AI tools that are coming out every day. And the simplest one is, or the example we've had a lot of success with in the last couple of months, is using the AI video, both the creation from scratch, like text to video, and the automated AI video editors with footage you shoot from your phone. Because what used to take days, if not months, from a professional video team to get out a message, to craft a message, to edit a video, to put it out to the world, you can now do with like your thumb in maybe 3 or 4 seconds. And so we've been empowering both big company individuals and on our own team to just make little AI videos that kind of shock the system and are like, whoa, can do that fast and that impactful, that message, and get that many viewers with that much ease. What else can we do? So It's not that you're trying to change the whole system at the same time, but you're removing some of the fear and workload by providing a little bit of transparency to the AI effect directly with this simple example of video. And it works wonders. Anybody watching, you make a video and you show it, like in your next meeting, you show one at the beginning of the meeting, at the end of the meeting, and I promise you it'll change everybody's perspective and mood and reduce the fear to make change.
That's super smart. I've given the same advice over and over again for people that are in environments where communication is mission critical, right? And so a lot of people default to PowerPoints or things like that, right? Where I'll craft a narrative and I'll put it together. But I've also given the people the idea of, instead of sending an email, maybe send a video, short video, just like you just said. The novelty and the impact of it can really make a huge difference.
Yeah, but you've got to start with that fear of yourself. So the first thing you have to do is you have to literally delete PowerPoint from your computer. You will not make change unless you delete the application altogether so you cannot use it. Your fear will win. Your boss's pressure will win if you can default back to PowerPoint. So just delete it from your computer. And I promise that will change the way you deliver, the way you communicate, and the success you have and the lack of fear that you'll face.
Cold turkey.
Definitely. I think I did it 5 or 6 years ago. And remember, I'm a recovering consultant. Like, that's sacrilegious to get rid of PowerPoint. And it's transformed the way I work, and I think the way others around me work too.
Yeah, I can believe that. Again, one of my early mentors taught me 7 times, 7 different ways, right? If you want a message to land with people, you've got to send that message 7 times in 7 different ways. And if you're just making 7 different PowerPoints and you're not getting any momentum, I'm not shocked.
I was working with a bunch of doctors 2 weeks ago, and they said they have to message it 27 times for doctors to actually get the message.
Wow. I'm not surprised. My company, we do a lot of work in med tech, and a lot of startups and people have the idea of, we'll do an app and then have the doctors download the app. And we did a lot of research, and the last thing doctors want to do is download the apps. They don't want to use apps. They don't want to use any of those things. And you go back to the startup people and they're like, what's wrong with them? This is good for them. This will help them. And it's
doesn't matter. Yep. So we've established no apps 7 times, no PowerPoint, no fear, and do it for the planet in our first 5 or 10 minutes talking together. Where are you taking this conversation?
I was thinking about the idea of like transformation with these organizations. And I'm this change agent in this organization, or maybe I want to become this change agent in an organization. A lot of times people have this imposter syndrome, for lack of a better word, right? Of that they think they've got this great idea, but if it's a larger organization, they don't know all the moving pieces of it. And so they might be worried that they're coming in and pitching ideas that people have done before. How many organizations, Brandon, have you been a part of where they've got 6 initiatives across the organization that are all trying to fix the same problem, right?
Yeah.
So if I want to be a true change agent inside of these organizations, where do I start? Where in your mind has you seen success with people who can lead transformation inside of an organization?
Oh, you definitely don't have to worry about all those other initiatives. You just got to start. Most people don't start. So you got to start. I spent a number of years working for, I think, the largest employer in town. And I was frustrated by your exact question and didn't know where to start. And so I just started sitting in the lobby. And people thought I was a little crazy, and maybe they still do. But I just started sitting in a lobby so I could understand what was actually going on, what those initiatives were, who was working on them, how they were working or not working. And when you sit in the lobby, you learn a lot of stuff about what's going on. So I don't know if that's an answer for everyone that wants to be a change maker or move forward, but between no PowerPoint, no fear, and sitting in the lobby, you can probably make some pretty quick progress that you would otherwise be sitting in front of your computer on PowerPoint, not just moving forward.
Yeah. I've given the same advice, is that if you do want to start
making the lobby too?
Yeah.
I'm always looking for fellow lobby sitters.
Not the lobby, the parking ramp. That's more my stuff. I can play music and things out there, catch people having cigarettes when they're not supposed to be. The thing for me has been really being ultra curious, asking people about what problems they're trying to solve in the organization, right? So I might have identified a problem that I think maybe I can help lead some change on. And what I've seen is people just if they do start, they just start barreling through making those changes. And then over time, they bump into other people who have maybe attempted this and they're like, oh, they'll never change that, just give it up. Or other divisions inside the organization that are like, that's not your lane, stay in your lane. And you just get beaten up along the way, like in a pinball machine, and then you finally just give up. And the advice I've given is you don't want to go out and just start trying to solve problems, but exactly to your point, you want to go out and try to find out what problems people have.
Oh, you got to do both. And
sure.
Yeah. If we're talking more the innovation space of getting beat up, you got to get beat up 100 times a day.
You got to have thick skin.
That's just part of the job if that's what you want. I was mentioning that work in Kenya for the planet, and they have these traditional conferences. They have those beautiful giant screens that usually which they put boring PowerPoint. So I don't know why they do that. But anyways, let's not get lost in that rabbit hole. And they said, Brandon, it's all structured. You can't play video on the screen. And it's like, what do you mean you can't play video? I've seen you play video. You have to do all this setup. You have to do all this stuff. And so we just made an announcement over the loudspeaker for people to airdrop to the guy that sits behind the screen that controls the screen. Just airdrop your video file to him. And we are able to circumvent the entire approval process, the entire PowerPoint making process, everything, because people just used not even a new tech to airdrop files directly to the guy controlling it. And therefore, we're probably cutting out 15 people that would normally be involved and get videos to actually make everybody happy and get more work. So there's always a way. Yes, you do get beat up nonstop every day, all the time.
How do you build that resilience? You're being told no a lot. Where have you found that? Where does that resilience come from? Is that something you learn over time? Is that from your childhood? Like, where does that come from?
I don't know. I never thought about that. Right?
No, it's good.
I guess it's just expected. So maybe it is from my childhood, not physical abuse, obviously,
sure.
but yes, maybe I did get beat up all the time or fail all the time. So it's just natural to be a pinball 100 times a day. There you go.
Yeah, for me,
Anybody want?
I think as I got older and these big scary organizations and these big people with these big titles realizing that they don't know what the hell they're doing and they're making it up every single day, I think gave me a lot more inspiration to go out and solve problems, because I don't care what their title is or how much money they have. They're still figuring out what to do on a daily basis. And once you really believe that, not just believe it and talk about it, and once you really believe it at your core, that's when I think you can really go out and start solving problems in a meaningful way, to your point, and being able to get beat up, because the blows they're more like a wiffle ball bat when they're coming from people who are hitting you with problems that are based off of fear than fact.
Definitely.
For me, once I realized that no matter what their title was or how much money they were bringing in, that they were figuring things out every day. And I realized that a lot of their pushback was coming from a fear-based situation instead of a factual-based situation. And I'm guessing you've run into that many times.
Fear-based versus fact-based. Is there a difference?
I feel that there is. Again, if I'm working with 3M and I'm working with Six Sigma scientists, I'm pushing back on what's that?
I'm just kidding. Sorry.
No, okay. They're gonna overwhelm me with facts. Now, whether or not they are truly factual, I think that there's different lanes where fear is more commonly used, and especially I would say in being a change agent in a way that where you're changing a culture of an organization versus the chemical composite of a rubber or something.
Yeah. So I don't know if you were intending to do this, but we got the 3 F's going: fear, feelings, and facts, that in our current society seem to be all intermixed. I can't remember who the author was that wrote about feelings, how our current society expects us to share our feelings more, and perhaps that's some of the cause of the fear and the disbelief in facts.
Oh, sure.
By not understanding fear and by not perhaps being educated or having too many feelings to be biased in our facts, we're causing a lot of these problems ourselves. If you sit in the lobby, you don't have any of those 3 problems, but that's just me.
You got to deal with them once you leave the lobby, you got the next steps, right?
Yeah.
It's the idea for me is that if I can identify what's driving some of these fears or some of these choices that people have. I know I've worked in the past with a business leader who was afraid that everybody knew that he didn't know what he was doing, even though he was doing a fairly good job. Like he wasn't.
Are we talking about you or me right now?
No, somebody I worked with in the past.
Yeah.
But they were doing a fairly good job, but they felt that everybody knew that they were full of shit. So when it came to trying new things outside of the norm, they were very anti that, because they couldn't glom onto some outside example to say, or some outside analogy of some kind or metaphor to show why what they were trying to do was correct, because they needed that in order to prove that what they were doing was the correct thing, instead of just saying, I came up with this thing, right? And it could be based on a bunch of other things. And I find that it's not just those leaders, but it's also a lot of people in this sort of mid-management roles where they're not only having to manage a team below them, but they're also having to managing peers that are in other departments and divisions. And then they have to manage the bosses or stakeholders or whatever the case may be. It's a tough place to be.
So it sounds like you're taking the 3 F's into account and the current trend of the day that everybody's a storyteller and that they're not good at telling the story to balance out the 3 F's plus their peers and their bosses.
Is that something that you found to be important in your career, is being a good storyteller?
I guess I never thought of it as storytelling, but that's the trendy word to say it.
Sure.
I also think that a lot of people don't spend too much time in PowerPoint and don't have enough stories to tell or personal experiences to base that on, whether you're factual or not, or feelings or not. And what is it? I think there's only 4 types of luck, or someone has figured that there's 4 types of luck, but the primary driver of luck is simply movement, which in my mind means you're doing things,
not sitting still.
PowerPoint all day. And so how do we, as individuals, if you want to be a good storyteller yet be authentic, create enough movement or luck for yourself to have those stories in order to progress it forward.
Got it.
So you brought up 3M and the Six Sigma guys. My grandpa worked for 3M for 45 years and was part of the Post-it team, which is an infamous innovation story. And he told me when I was much younger, he's like, all those stories you read about innovation and the way the Post-it mode, nonsense. I was like, what do you mean, Grandpa? And he didn't use the word movement because it wasn't trendy at the time, but he basically said movement, that the folks living in North St. Paul, essentially, some of them went to church together. Some of them played sports together. And so they intermixed much more rapidly and continuously without looking down at cell phones all the time, and talked about all the elements in a different environment, aka movement or luck, to connect the right people, the right processes, the right ideas to come up with a pretty cool invention. And that's a very different game and a much simpler game that we can all play just by moving more and create cool things like the Post-it note.
Yeah.
But I'm not saying all those other stories are wrong. My grandpa just had a very different take on what
I'm
actually
sure.
caused the creation of a global nuisance and polluter, if you ask me, but we won't go there either.
Sure. That's a key theme that I've seen over the years, is that people have talked in the big four, and these people have coined the digital transformation and all these different things that have to do with it. But I have never seen a digital transformation happen without cultural transformation. To your exact point is that, but the problem is that's not what CEOs want to buy. CEOs don't want to buy cultural transformation. It sounds a little woo to me, Brandon. So digital transformation, that sounds sexy and something I could put in a PowerPoint for the shareholders. But do you agree? Do you think that the only way to make these changes is a cultural transformation?
Oh man, digital transformation, culture transformation, strategic transformation. This sounds two old consultants talking to each other. We got to change this up a little bit. Can I respectfully decline to answer that question?
Yep, it's totally fine. And like I said, the idea of making change in an organization, it sounds like what I'm hearing from you is it just comes down to people.
Doesn't everything?
You would think, but not according to some of the PowerPoints I've seen.
That's very fair enough. All right, point taken. Yes, sorry. Carry on.
Well, so the idea, Brandon, is that let's go back to your example about showing videos at the conference, right? So they hadn't planned on showing videos. And why in your mind was it imperative to have those videos play? Why at that time was it time to transform their agenda and get those videos to play?
Yeah. I guess we go back to fear with that one. Most people walk into a meeting or office and go where they're told or where they think the culture or society has told them to go. And in conferences, that means you go into typically a dimly lit room with a big screen and rows of chairs, and you find a seat that fits your personality. By smiling, I assume you know what I'm talking about, which
I do.
The people in the front row smirking the whole time, the back row people, the one taking up the seats next to them, blocking those seats, the lurkers. That's my favorite participant type, the lurkers.
The people who stand in the back with their arms crossed.
And my favorite thing is when there's like 1,000 chairs free, they'll go around to the side door, pick up a chair and sit in a separate spot. Themselves.
Yep.
And I've made it a habit over like the last 25 years of interviewing those people to figure out what point on your mind that you wouldn't take one of the empty 1,000 chairs and that you're going to go make everybody's life more difficult by doing that. So as you walk into these rooms, and you being you or anybody watching or anybody that has a little bit of fear, having watched, I don't know, hundreds of thousands of people walk into these spaces, and I credit those numbers to sitting in the lobby and participating in countless events. Everybody likes it. Everybody loves it when someone steps out or steps up a little bit and offers a little bit of change or lack of fear or difference. And I've never seen anyone ever get in trouble for it. Take that back. I've seen some inappropriate stuff, and that doesn't count in my mind. So don't be radically inappropriate and everyone will embrace it. Like everybody, it just always works.
Yeah. I think, again, back to your point about it's the same whether it's a meeting in a conference room or it's a conference right? Is people likes to the idea of breaking the norm. Yeah, it's going to be a little uncomfortable for a few minutes, right?
Yeah.
But it doesn't have to be anything cheesy. Let's go around and talk about what we had for dinner last night, or I don't know, icebreakers.
Yep. And you don't have to set context for it either. You don't have to say this is going to be a dumb question, or you don't have to ask if you can stand up, or you don't have to do all those things that the side is told we have to do in order to be respectful about it. Just doing it as yourself.
And so tell me about the impact those videos had at that, in when you had that shakeup. Did you see a noticeable change in the, I don't know, mood or position of the audience?
Yeah, I struggle to answer that a little bit because I try to look at it a little bit further down the line. What's the actual impact? What are the commitments to change the climate goals, as this one was particular about? So this is only a couple days fresh. So I would love to be able to answer that when decisions are made for climate impact. But the short answer is that does changing the mood, does making people smile, does getting storytelling, getting the right facts on the table, do all these little things that bring those to the table make a difference? Sure. Yes. Are they worth doing? Absolutely. Will they make a difference in the long run? I don't know, unless you track it and follow up, which is a discussion for another day.
Sure. And that's in the case of those best practices, you're somebody that knows about events and how those things go. Is there a magic bullet, something you do at every single one to engage people? Something that's that's your brand, your stamp?
Other people would say that. I just see if I have one example here.
Oh, please.
I don't. Nope. So I never wear the name tag of the company or the event that I go to, because almost every name tag in history has been made incorrectly, in my opinion. It shows, if a normal name tag is like this, it shows your name relatively small, your last name even smaller. It might have the giant logo of the company or the event you're going to. And I know which freaking event I'm at. You don't need to tell someone name tag. So you can't read them. And two, they don't serve a practical purpose. So some are getting better with whether it be RFID or QR codes, you can actually interact. Those are definitely beneficial. But I replaced the event or company name tag with my own personal little notebook. And so I wear a notebook on my chest instead of the name tag with a pen hooked into it, so that I can take notes on if I meet you here and say something or follow up on something, so that I can actually stay committed instead of just passing you a wrinkled business card.
No, that's great. As somebody who enjoys networking, I love that idea of being able to have on-demand note-taking capabilities without pulling out a digital device or some sort of phone, which gives the impression that you're not engaged.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And is there, as a conference-going person, is there a networking technique you'd like to share?
Oh, I'll leave that to the experts like you. And make a fruitless plug for your book. If you want a real answer to that, read your book. There you go.
There you go. Yeah. Well, that was
a Freudian slip or not. I didn't mean to say fruitless plug. I meant to say incredibly beneficial plug for reading your book.
That too. They're shameless and fruitless and beneficial. So for me, I would say probably one of the least favorite places I have to network is a conference. I do meet good people, but it's usually the follow-up after the conference is probably the best networking. Like the initial, I meet you and move on as quickly as possible to get to our next conversation has been really beneficial for me. Instead of trying to make some sort of real connection right there in the moment at the conference, that would be my best advice: is don't linger, follow up.
Unless you want to make it awkward, you shake their hand for 6 seconds, and then the follow-up will be much stronger. I promise you that. There's one little tip there. 6 seconds, hold on to your hand. It'll change.
6 seconds.
Yep.
That sounds like what politicians do, because they do the handshake and then they put their hand on top of the.
That's just for show.
Yeah, this is for show. One last question I have for you is, I want to go back to the idea about how we maybe make changes, individuals, in this era of climate change, like you're talking about. What are some of the things that you had mentioned you're exploring as how do I do this as a family unit, as a family business, our family as a business? What are some of the things that you've explored? Is it the typical solar and those sorts of things, or are you thinking more outside of the box?
trying to think outside of the box. My wife is still mad at me, but when the Nissan Leaf first came out, which I think was the first like production electric car before Tesla was even born, right? All that stuff. I don't know how many, I want to say it was like 12 years ago, maybe. And I bought one of those and I put a giant decal, the entire width of the car that said 0 emission on it. And my wife refused to drive it. And most people would just look at me like, what is wrong with you? And I don't know if it ever did any good. So perhaps my advice on environmental changes isn't very useful to a wide audience, because I don't know how many people see your car as you're driving down, but I drove around Minneapolis for the better part of 2 or 3 years with that car. And I don't know if it made a difference, or I could take credit for the entire electrification of cars in America. One of those.
I think that's fair. Let's do that.
Yeah. The giant decal, it made all the difference.
Yeah. Well, we've talked about the importance of facts. So I think we'll stick to the facts, which is Brandon's a catalyst for nationwide changes.
There we go. Thank you for that compliment.
I think that's fair, right?
This goes on my Wikipedia page, right? Because you said it now, I'm sure.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. No, it's canon, as they would say in comic books. So
yeah. A lot of times you say you don't know what you don't know, or it is what it is. And a couple of years ago, I got the opportunity to go on the runway with the fighter planes that we send all over the world, like the F-35s, these crazy planes. And it was with the lead test pilot for the Air Force, which is a pretty cool and crazy job to have.
Very serious job.
And you just think about what they have to do with experimental things going like 2,000 miles an hour. It's just almost every human on the planet will never have to face those challenges.
Yeah.
And when a group of us were talking to him, someone says, it is what it is. And he stopped and he started yelling at the person. Everybody was just like, oh, what the heck is going on? And he said, it is not, it is what it is. It is what you make it. And everybody, in the context of him being an experimental pilot, was like, oh, yeah. If you said it is what it is, he'd crash all the time.
Yeah.
And from then on, I was like, oh, I guess I can't say it is what it is, and I have to do something different. So people don't realize when they say it is what it is, it's usually not true. So like Excel, which powers most of our homes in the Twin Cities, I think, you just have to call and it switches you to, I think, solar and wind power. And it's a few more cents or a few more dollars a month, but most people don't even realize you have to make one phone call and you're wind and solar powered. And I shouldn't say everybody, but it's not a significant change in price at all.
Sure.
So not taking the backward stance of it is what it is with the environment and, these companies and government need to tell me what to do. It's just one phone call to change.
Back to your point earlier, I think education has to come first. You've got to get curious. You've got to explore some of these things. Because again, like, how does a person find out that it's just a phone call away? Is it Excel marketing it the right way, so I hear about it? Is it the neighbor gets it and happens to mention it at the bus stop? Or do you know what I mean? Like, that change has got to come through seeking education.
Maybe that's fear. So I didn't know the answer when I started on the environmental journey. I didn't know the answer, and all I did was think, I don't know if I did it intentionally or not, but I'm going to make one phone call a week environmentally related. And so I started that. And I've met a lot of people somewhat connected to the environmentalists, whether it's a scientist at the University of Minnesota or a farmer or you name it, to do that. And by just having those very short phone calls once a week, and you don't have to do it once a week, you can do it once a month, heck, once a year, it'll make a difference. There's also something in the Twin Cities called adopt a drain. You can adopt the drain so that the watershed and the lakes don't get polluted. Like, it's really simple. You don't even have to adopt the drain. You can just clean the drain and pretend you adopted it, and you don't have to even make a phone call. So there's so many things out there that you can do. And for me, knowing anything about the environment, except for in the early days, buying decals and putting on electric cars, you just have to make maybe a 10-minute phone call a month. And that will change your stance and the planet's chance for the future.
Yeah. Well, that's a perfect way to end out our conversation. So Brandon, if I want to get in touch with you, if I want to connect with you and learn more about the things specifically that you've learned about too, where's a great place to do that? How do I reach out to you?
How about we don't do that? They have to reach out to you in order to get to me.
Oh, I love that idea. All right, everyone. So you know how to get in touch with me. You can just go to kurtschmidt.me, and then I will, if you want to get in touch with Brandon, and you're not some crackpot, I will connect you to them. So.
Oh, send me the crackpots too. They're the best.
Oh, okay. All right. I will flood your inbox. All right, Brandon. Thanks for taking the time today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Really a pleasure.
All right.
See ya. Stay crazy.
We appreciate you taking the time to listen to this episode of Schmidt List. The stories shared by our guests are genuinely inspiring and offer insightful knowledge. It's important to remember that success doesn't happen overnight and requires collaboration, learning, and perseverance. If you want to broaden your professional connections, check out Kurt's book, The Little Book of Networking: How to Build Your Career One Conversation at a Time, on Amazon. Please stay connected with all things Schmidt List on social media, leave a review for the podcast, and join our community of like-minded entrepreneurs. Thank you for being part of Schmidt List. Keep innovating, collaborating, and chasing your entrepreneurial dreams.